Preferring to look on the positives, it's hard to disguise the fact the Jets won't be playing again for a while. Knocked out of the World Club qualifiers in the first round, the Jets have been temporarily grounded.
Any tournament that you want to play in, you want to do well. And so it was disappointing in lots of ways.
None more so for Andrew Durante, who remains in Gosford Hospital tonight after suffering a second leg break in as many years after this challenge from Central Coast's Nick Merger.
The welfare of the player is always the number one thing, and there's people who have got responsibility to look after that, and I didn't feel that they did that on the night.
A thinly veiled strike at referee Matthew Breeze may be, but the Jets won't be letting the issue rest.
I know that the club's looking at it very carefully, and they'll do what they need to do accordingly to the situation.
While Newcastle Jets management are almost certain to lodge a complaint, it seems it'll achieve next to nothing. Under FIFA rules, no further action can be taken against a player who's already been booked for an offence. Only had he been sent off, can he then incur a suspension. On a positive note, injured skipper Ned Zellich joined his teammates today at the recovery session after suffering a slight knee strain, which should only keep him from running for only the next 2 to 3 weeks. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
The Institute's Philip Carr-Keats said that the removal of the vendor tax and a reduction of land tax in the state budget would bring more people into the investment property market, but buyers are there.
Owners of properties have got to realise that when they're listing their property for sale, they've got to listen to the statistics that are presented by the agent, and if they're doing that, there are plenty of buyers there. It's all happening. Still a very, very popular spot.
Mr Carr-Keats said areas like the Hunter, which had shown the greatest growth during the halcyon days, are the places most affected when there is a downturn. But within the one market, relative values stay the same.
If you're going to buy a property now, and if you're going to sell a property and you're going to buy it, the pricing is not that important, because if you're buying and selling in the same market, all things stay relatively equal.
Speaking for the Real Estate Institute, Mr Carr-Keats said he did not know of people being put off at agencies, but that could be a possibility if there is a further tightening of the market.
Starting from the second row, Kevin Curtin's Yamaha team had battled with bikes set up all week at the Italian circuit. It didn't take long after the start for the Hondas to set an all-too-familiar pace. But Curtin was hanging on to fourth as a top two finish ran out of sight. Not everyone's day ended the right way up. While Curtin was squeezed into fifth by a fraction of a second, but still with a hold on third overall. Closer to home and in Premier League hockey, good wins for West, South and Maitland, who beat the Tigers 4-1. After a dour first 20 minutes, it all changed before the break, with Maitland scoring first and then following up with a second in a matter of minutes. The Tigers hit back almost immediately and in great fashion too. But Maitland had plenty of tricks of their own as they got the money in a 3-goal win.
It's probably the first decent fog we've had all year, and it's due to the southerly change on the weekend. It left some showers behind. We had a little bit of humidity.
Harry James has been a volunteer for Meals on Wheels since he retired from the mines in 1983. The youthful 81-year-old was roped into the service by a friend, and 22 years later, he's still there, delivering meals to men and women more than 10 years his junior.
I don't see myself as getting Meals on Wheels. I'm not old enough. It fills in some spare time. I enjoy doing it, and also I think, well, I should put something back in.
Around 50,000 volunteers from across New South Wales and Queensland are putting something back in, preparing and delivering some 5 million meals every year. And while the nutritious three-course dinners make life a bit easier for the frail, aged and people with disabilities, the service goes far beyond a bite to eat.
You become friendly with the people on your run, and it's really nice to catch up with them and share their lives.
They bring me some books sometimes, and yes, oh yes, we chat away about ourselves and my garden. I love the flowers.
Actually, somebody like Mrs. Douglas, who puts her arms around you after you've delivered the meals and say thank you so much for doing this.
Celebrations are being held across the country this week, recognising the hundreds of volunteer organisations and people who give so freely of their time. Colleen West, NBN News.
It's been more than a decade since the Weeklies Drive intersection with the New England Highway at Beresfield was identified as being in need of an upgrade. Paterson MP Bob Baldwin today announced Canberra has agreed to a plan developed by the New South Wales Roads and Traffic Authority for $25 million funding that will be in tomorrow's budget. But State Roads Minister Michael Costa said that falls well short of the $33.6 million needed for the job.
I just think a lot of it is just political infighting, state government having a go at federal government because it's their turn for the budget coming up tomorrow night.
The upgrade includes an overpass over Weeklies Drive to carry traffic in both directions along the New England Highway. Weeklies Drive will then be extended under the National Highway to join the Thornton-Beresfield Link Road. Maitland Mayor Peter Blackmore is confident money will be made available for the interchange, which should fix one of the Hunter's worst traffic congestion hotspots.
If there is an overrun, I'm certain that both governments have got to work together to make sure it is completed. You cannot leave something half finished.
Todd Nardi, NBN News.
Although keeping their head above water, Newcastle had that familiar sinking feeling today. Almost none of them have ever endured such a losing streak in their careers, and trying to stay positive is getting tougher.
We're turning up each week and a bit of hard work and a few players coming back. Well, same story, mate. We've been saying it for 2 months now.
It's that sort of frank assessment that landed Danny Baderis in hot water with referee Steve Lyons. A few seconds later, that's where the skipper was heading. But his coach and team could understand his frustration.
Well, I thought there was a couple of very poor calls, and I thought the referee probably interfered with what was a pretty good game of football, I thought, at half-time.
Oh, it was a frustrating game. The ruck was that slow, and Danny, I don't know if he lost his cool. I think he's got a right to ask the question.
After a competitive first half, Newcastle could well have gone to the break in the lead. Instead, the Roosters ran in 5 second-half tries. Frustration spread, Adam Woolnough sparking a bit of push and shove. While he was cleared today of any charge, Matt White was levelled with a careless high tackle but won't incur a suspension. Jim Callanan, NBN News. A meeting of the minds at Jets headquarters this afternoon, and much centred around this Nick Merger tackle on Andrew Durante, one which left the defender with a broken leg.
It was unfortunate and it wasn't great, but it's just part of the game now, and we're very sorry, the club's very sorry, and so is Nick Merger that it actually happened.
Not good enough, say Newcastle. Unable to take the matter further under soccer's laws, management has spoken with Durante about taking civil action against the Central Coast player.
The more I look at the incident, the more appalled I am at the nature of the incident.
Around 12 to 16 weeks by the most recent prognosis, while Merger is free to play the Mariners' next game tomorrow night. Jet skipper Ned Zelic, meanwhile, will return to Austria this week to help his family make the journey south, but he could well be packing a former teammate also. Known as a left-side player who played with Zelic during his time with German club 1860 Munich, he'll trial with the club for the 20th and final spot on the roster.
Played a significant number of games in the Bundesliga, as well as some matches in the Premier League with Arsenal. So we're not talking about a mug.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
Becoming a self-funded retiree through investment properties at Port Stephens was a great idea a couple of years ago, but it appears that things have become a lot tougher for those mum and dad investors. 140 people gathered at Shoal Bay last night, with real estate agents and investors agreeing the Port Stephens property market is struggling. The Carr government's vendor tax wore the blame. The vendor or exit tax was introduced around 12 months ago, bringing a 2.25% slug on the sale of investment properties.
Well, when we plan to retire, if we sell and to move interstate, we're going to be paying an exit tax that will hamper our standard of living for an investment that we've been planning for over 20 years.
Also identified last night was the number of people like Bob and Judy Willis who have been hit with skyrocketing land valuations.
We bought a small property a few years ago to retire to in beautiful Lemon Tree Passage, and the valuation went from $77,000 to $341,000 in that 3-year period.
Todd Nardi, NBN News. Tomaree Lodge at Shoal Bay is a facility for people with an intellectual disability. A program is being launched this week calling for volunteers to visit the lodge and become a friend to a resident. After being there for just minutes today, we found out the 40 residents are happy, friendly, gentle people, and do they love a chat.
One of our goals is to break down barriers and raise awareness and just get people to know a little bit more about what the lodge is about. That's a microphone.
How you going, mate?
What's that?
Check, testing, check 1, 2.
Check 1, 2.
Okay, thank you.
The Links to the Community project is being run by the Tomaree Neighbourhood Centre. It aims to pair a volunteer with a resident from the Tomaree Lodge, suggesting once the program starts, the two new friends could go into town to shop, go for walks, or just chat by the water.
Just having more interaction and taking clients out in the community, people will see they're just like everybody else. They've just got a disability that they've got to work with.
Anybody interested in volunteering for the program should ring 4984 6220. Todd Nardi, NBN News.
Tax revenue from the in-demand minerals sector, including the Hunter's coal industry, is ensuring Canberra has plenty to spend. Ironically, as the region's business community sat down to lunch today, their thoughts were on how they can assist the Samaritans' winter appeal. An organisation worried welfare to work reforms in the budget will only add to their 60,000 client a year workload.
There are real threats there for people on disability pensions and people on lone parent benefits and for people who are long-term unemployed. Most of the people in those categories that I meet want a job.
Employment creation is also on the mind of Hunter Business, and guaranteed funds to build the F3 freeway extension into the Hunter Valley would be a help.
Look, the F3 extension has been on everyone's lips for some time now, and we're looking for the government to commit the funds to enable us to build the F3 extension through to Branxton.
And the Business Chamber supports tax cuts but wants them drip-fed over a period of time so interest rates don't rise.
Tax breaks are very, very important. Things are starting to tighten up in business. It's important that people have more spare money to spend, which is great for business. That enables us to employ more people.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
we've put in place at the moment is we've put some additional steps in our washing system before sterilisation, and we're confident that will fix the problem for us.
It takes a person with special qualities to become a volunteer foster grandparent, committing a large part of your life to loving and caring for someone who isn't your own flesh and blood. Elsie Sager has 5 foster grandkids, including Sue Betteridge, and treats them all as her own.
I love her as if she were mine. I worry about her, I nag her, rouse on her, complain at her, don't I, darling?
And that love is clearly mutual. Without a family of her own, Elsie says her foster kids mean everything.
My life revolves around the days that I come in as foster gran because I love my foster grandchildren.
Despite having his own 17 grandchildren and 9 great-grandchildren, Bruce Punton has visited his 2 foster grandsons twice a week for the last 2 decades.
Well, they've made my life in the last 20 years. I've looked forward to coming here, and they are important because they seem so happy. Like Craig will smile when you see him, and a big smile, and you say, well, that's worth coming over to.
The foster grandparent scheme has been running since 1985. The volunteers provide special one-on-one contact for those living at state government centres for developmentally disabled people. For some of the residents, their surrogate grandparents are their only visitors. Tomorrow night, passing on a passion for art, the remarkable story of one woman's infectious energy and enthusiasm for her work as a volunteer guide, inspiring countless young people for the last 16 years. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Jodie Adams is one of the Hunter's most senior ambulance officers. While performing her duties, she's witnessed scenes of countless tragedies and treated all manner of people. But nothing can prepare even the most experienced paramedic for an outburst of violence from a patient, and that's what happened when Jodie was bitten by a man.
In this case, a patient was affected by drug and alcohol and had to lash out in some way, and unfortunately my arm just had to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
After an anxious 3-month wait, HIV/AIDS blood test results came back negative.
3 months is a long time, but it is the standard process. If anyone has been in contact with blood or any other body fluids.
It's often assumed police officers are the emergency service personnel that have to put up with violence, but abusive behaviour is as much of a reality for paramedics.
That's right, ambulance officers are trained to help the sick and injured, and we will do that in the best way that we can. However, if somebody on scene is being argumentative or obstructive, it makes our job very, very difficult. And the ambulance service does have a policy of zero tolerance on violence against officers.
Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
He's leaving no stone unturned to come back quickly and on top of his game, but like all red and blue these days, it's hard to hide the hurt.
You know, I feel for the whole club at the moment, but we just got to stick in and stay positive, keep working hard, it'll turn, and you know, it'd be nice to think we can get in a run and win 10 in a row or something and make the semis.
As a group, the players are as upbeat as they can be, hoping strength through unity will prevail.
The boys are still positive. We're still going to have lunches and dinners and sticking together.
It's all about keeping up morale, but their coach can't question their commitment. If anything, he was encouraged by the way his younger pack stood up to that of the Roosters. He just wants them to cut a balance.
But obviously we need to do that within being disciplined, and the game's too hard now to concede penalties and have someone in the bin when you're playing against a good football team.
The one to play the Tigers includes a backline that has question marks over a number, with Matthew Gidley, George Carmont and Steve Witt of most concern.
You know, they had the benefit of a week off, as did Steve and Witt, so we'll give them the benefit of this week to get their injuries sorted out and hopefully get to the line on Sunday.
In the midst of a trade skill shortage, there was universal hunter support for Canberra's boost to training programs.
It's a good start, but we should remember that there's a huge gap in our skills availability in the hunter, and we need lots of these places into the future.
The Hunter Council of Social Service agrees, with training vital if disability pensioners, single parents and mature-aged unemployed are to enter the workforce. But the welfare reforms worry HCOS President Seth Shevels.
If all it's got to offer is more job interviews, more dole diaries, more work activity tests, more failures, less money, a less generous income support system, we'll have people suffering in the hunter, and welfare agencies will see more customers.
Despite Newcastle University's financial woes, there was no assistance nor reinstatement of its regional status.
I think that what the future for the University of Newcastle is not to be considered as the best regional university in Australia, which is what we are at the moment, even if we don't get regional funding, but to be considered as one of the top 10 universities in Australia.
On the positive side of the ledger, easing the tax burden will help hunter business.
And that's great. That'll provide a big stimulus for all of the region, and business tax cuts will be equally effective.
Government spending this year includes $97 million for the region's roads, including the Pacific Highway north of Karua, while Williamtown RAAF base gets $27 million for redevelopment work to accommodate the incoming AWACS aircraft. Gary Blair, NBN News.
When Emma Sylvester's baby boy arrived 10 weeks early, this place became her new home. The Tamworth mum spent 3 weeks at Ronald McDonald House while little Kai was being cared for at John Hunter Children's Hospital.
It's a wonderful place, home away from home. I don't know what I would have done without Ronald McDonald House.
Emma's family is one of 380 to call the house home each year, but many more miss out.
For the last 18 months or so, we've had to turn 2 to 3 families away each day that sort of need somewhere to stay nearby their children.
And soon there'll be more room for them. Adding to the existing 12 motel-style rooms, 6 new self-contained units currently under construction.
They'll have their own kitchen, their own dining area, and be much better for the long stays and also for those kids that need to be isolated.
The units should be completed by August, opening the doors of Ronald McDonald House to more families like the Sylvesters.
It's not until you have to make use of a facility like this that you realise how important it is and what sort of work they do and how good they are to families.
The house is seeking more community donations to help pay for the extensions, the fundraising target still short by $250,000. Natasha Bayersdorf, NBN News.
It was a day of anti-sickness for cancer patients, no one allowed to think or talk about their illness. Instead, it was premium pampering and plenty of entertainment to keep the minds of those attending on the positive.
I've been getting thoroughly spoiled. I've had a pedicure, I've had my nails done, and I'm going to have a facial, which will make me feel really good for the rest of the day.
And there was plenty to do, undergo an ultimate makeover thanks to dozens of volunteer makeup artists and manicurists. Those a little more adventurous learnt a few new skills in a drumming workshop or sat back as renowned cartoonist Peter Lewis created a caricature in just minutes. It was the inaugural Bald and Beautiful event, but organisers hope there will be many more to come.
And I thought, well, why can't we have an adult version of Camp Quality? So it's a day of fun, pampering and well-being for adults with cancer.
And after a big morning of entertaining, local funny men Tony Tamplin and Super Hubert were lying down on the job, enjoying some well-earned pampering of their own. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News. Just watching Nancy Tapp at work in the Newcastle Region Art Gallery can make you tired. Her infectious enthusiasm and passion for her work as a volunteer guide and remarkable knowledge of art history has inspired thousands of young people for the past 16 years.
I love it, every minute of it, but it is so rewarding to have people that respond and are interested.
One of 25 volunteer guides, Nancy commits much of her life to researching artworks and exhibitions to help educate others.
He's got that tube like toothpaste and he's just squeezed it, hasn't he? Absolutely squeezed it out. And of course the density. Unless they put me out until the brain refuses to retain information and the legs give way.
Murray Brennan is another highly valued volunteer with an incredible passion for his work.
Good morning, Peter. How are you this morning? That's good. It's good to see you. I'm Murray, the volunteer on today. How's it been going? Good? Great. Anything exciting you're reading?
A bit of Wilbur Smith.
Bit of a Wilbur Smith, is it? Yeah.
Oh, I do. Okay.
And what about your visitors? Would you like a cup of tea or black tea? Our instructor, she says, you come here to play. And that's exactly what it is. You come here to play in a serious field, but it's because you have that attitude that you can give of yourself and you take a lot back.
He's been an inspirational figure for many of the patients who suffer from terminal illnesses, with his incredible compassion and empathy.
I think one of the greatest things is to just be a listener. Listen to the people, listen to their feelings, listen to their emotions, but at the same time enjoy yourself. You must enjoy yourself as a volunteer.
And it's clear Murray enjoys every minute and, like Nancy, has vowed to keep going as long as he can.
95, 99, forever. Whatever I'm capable of doing it.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Chaupu can be the greatest challenge on the professional surfing tour at the best of times. For the women's final day, lashing rain and wind squalls made tackling the heavy 2-metre waves even tougher. Wave quality was inconsistent. Reigning world champion Sofia Milenovic nailed one of the best barrels of the day, but not even that was enough to defeat Chelsea Georgeson in the semis. Georgeson went into the final against West Australian Melanie Redmond-Carr, and the famous reef break started to yield cleaner and slightly larger waves. In her first final in 3 years, 29-year-old Redmond-Carr found some tube time of her own. But Georgeson, the Gold Coast goofy footer, loves the big stuff. She wrapped up the All-Aussie final to claim the enviable title of Chaupu champion. The win catapulting Georgeson from 5th to 2nd on the World Championship Tour points tally.
You know, we've got 5 or 6 more events left, I think, so it's still got a long year to go, and I just hope that I can keep on a bit of a roll now.
It was a great final day for another young Australian. WCT rookie Rebecca Woods from the Central Coast finished equal third, the 20-year-old's best result on the tour. Todd Nardi, NBN News. Even on land, the Red Bellies offshore powerboat simply looks fast, but it hasn't been quite fast enough for the liking of owner-driver Bruce Sanders.
We've modified the bottom of the hull and done some conversion stuff to the engines, so hopefully we're up around the 100-105 mile an hour today on the harbour.
That's right, Bruce hit Newcastle Harbour testing to see if Red Bellies could exceed the mark that is of course equivalent to just over 160 kilometres per hour. Currently sitting second, it's the speed Bruce needs to consistently reach to win events in the National Offshore Series.
Most guys run over the 100 mile an hour mark. If you're not doing that speed, generally you're not on the lead lap.
With the harbour a far cry from ocean conditions today, Sanders exceeded that magical mark, boosting his confidence for the 4th round of the National Series this weekend. The following weekend, Red Bellies will compete in the Newcastle leg of the Offshore Series, but organisers say the event will be in some doubt if they don't find 6 volunteer boats for on-course safety duties.
It's going to be a mad scramble for the next week to try and find some course boats to go out there, but hopefully we do it.
Todd Nardi, NBN News.
A click of a mouse and a stroke of a key. This is making music in 2005. It's a far cry from music's traditional image, no faded score and quill, but composing nevertheless. These school teachers are learning all about advances in music technology to take back to their classrooms.
Being able to encourage students to compose music, to publish their own music using the computer, and even using the internet as a resource is a big thing for music nowadays.
From the latest advances to music's roots, the African community will headline celebrations to launch Newcastle Music Week. Music and dance are a way of life for the many African refugees who now call the Hunter home. Music Week organisers are dedicating the event to them, asking supporters to bring along small items to donate.
Musical equipment, we're after things like guitars and drums, we're after on practical things that can help them in their homes.
And in return, a chance to share the stage.
Yeah, with more people. When more people is good, one can make drum and then one can clap his hand.
The launch will run from 4:30 on Friday at Wheeler Place.
The Hyde family, originally from Fern Bay, knows all things netting. The project they're working on here is for a golf club in Sydney, but Nationwide Net Makers has also made shark nets, fishing nets and industrial nets for some big Australian companies. Qantas, Thiess, the RTA and the Australian Navy, just to name a few.
Well, we started off in the backyard 7 years ago. The growth has been unexpected. The clients are they get bigger and larger and more frequent daily.
The expansion, while welcome, has caused some difficulties for the Hydes. Chris admits the legalities of business is all a bit foreign to him.
Taking me from a needle in my hand to actually sitting at a desk and pretending to be a manager.
That's why the Hyde family sought assistance through the state government, which paired them with the Murray Wonder Business Consultancy Company.
As they're always there keeping an eye on you, just helping where they can, whether it be through tapes or programs.
There wasn't an empty seat in the House. Hundreds of staff and students of the University of Newcastle uniting in protest, many facing an uncertain future.
There's a feeling of shock, dismay, trepidation on what's ahead.
Shadow Minister for Education Jenny Macklin was among them, vowing to put pressure on the Howard government to provide emergency funding. But unions aren't hopeful. The Treasurer's already knocked that idea on the head.
He sees us as a union town. He won't help Newcastle. There's just no way. Wish he would. He's our Prime Minister, as I said in my talk. It's about time we had a fair go.
With 450 staff to go over the next 12 months, along with around 15% of undergraduate courses, many believe the university's reputation is now also at stake. During her visit to Newcastle, Jenny Macklin also announced Labor's proposal to double the number of school-based apprenticeships to meet the region's chronic skills shortage.
We've got major shortages and we need to encourage young people to get into the trades while they're still at school.
Callaghan College at Jesmond currently provides vocational education training to 300 students, but the Shadow Minister says more could be done throughout the region.
For most of us, this picture of Cessnock Correctional Centre is as close as we'll get to a jail. So Corrective Services is using Law Week to give the public a look at the department's activities from prisoner escort through inmate management. And as Belmont TAFE students and probation and parole personnel discovered today, the K9 unit doesn't just have nice-looking puppies. You're likely to encounter this passive alert dog before you get past a jail's front gate.
Predominantly that's a lot of work involving visitors, and as you know, and people would be aware that a lot of material is trafficked into correctional centres.
One way to make this dog's day is to sniff out drugs, which is rewarded with a high 4 from its handler. Should crowd control or recapturing an escaped inmate be required, there's a dog for the job.
If we need it, let's hope we don't need it most of the time, but it's nice and reassuring to know that it's there if we need it.
Back in the courtroom, the city had its first Law Week hypothetical. NBN News' Natasha Bayersdorf joining a 5-member panel on the bench for an insight into the roles of the various participants in a criminal trial. Gary Blair, NBN News.
Keith Williams makes a living from showing people how to play tennis, but today he was given a lesson he won't forget. Off the court, Sandy Knight is a 21-year-old shooting for the stars. Game on, however, and the fire begins to show. It's that ambition which has seen her rise to the top of the American college circuit. Based at the East Tennessee State University, she's already been voted that school's most valuable tennis player.
Being my first year over there, it was really nice to know that my teammates, picked me for that award, and it just goes on performance on the tennis court and attitude in training.
Like her ground strokes, it's an attitude you can't fault. Let's face it, Sandy isn't the tallest of tennis players, but it's a minor detail thanks to lightning-fast reflexes and a killer two-handed backhand.
It's usually the shot, no matter what, that I can rely on. It's just more natural than any other of my other shots, and I think I can usually use it to get people off the court pretty well.
Knight grew up watching the likes of Steffi Graf. It's someone she looks up to, and much like her idol, Sandy hasn't put everything in one basket. Apart from promising options in tennis circles, a career in journalism beckons when she completes her American degree in 2 years' time.
Sign up, how's that again?
It's a bare block now, but by next January, construction will have begun on 42 new homes on this site off Sandgate Road. A plan which features a combination of single-level and two-storey villas and townhouses was approved by Newcastle City Council overnight. Shortland Wetlands sold the block of land to local developer AIPT in 2003 as a means of ensuring the centre remained economically viable in the future. Wetlands CEO Tara Ewer said the proposal was the most environmentally sensitive one presented.
It was one of 7 expressions of interest, and this process happened around 18 months ago. This was one of the more environmentally sensitive developments that were put on the table, and the Wetlands Centre was particularly pleased with that.
Also getting the go-ahead from the council last night was the filling of a gully in King Edward Park. In finer weather, this section at the bottom of the park is a haven for kids with cardboard sleds, but it will soon be turned into an artificial wetland and recreational area. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
Holiday Coast and Clarence will become one, Manning and
Oxley will become one, Soccer Far North Coast and Tweed will become one, New England and North West will become one. And the NBN 2HD leagues, which are currently the flagships, will remain the flagships of Northern New South Wales, but they'll also be restructured to standing committees rather than individual members having a vote.
Whatever way you look at it, the scenes from Chaupu have once again been simply spectacular. But it was man's best friend with the most enviable vantage point for the final day. The perfect ride started before the finals. Corey Lopez was so deep in the barrel, but surprised everybody, earning his first ever 10-point ride. With the standard set, Brazilian Paulo Moura found one of the cleanest and biggest tubes.
Oh my God!
Some of the Tahitian surfers were still mixing it with the world's best, and there was no contest when it came to local support. There was also an Aussie dad, all smiles in the water, and this is why Gold Coast surfer Joel Parkinson pulled into some massive barrels on his backhand, doing enough to finish 9th overall.
As long as you got a good barrel on a set, you're going to get a big score.
Also winding up in 9th spot, former Chaupu champion Andy Irons barrelled enough points to secure second on the overall series ratings behind North Coast surfer Trent Munro. But the day and contest belonged to one of surfing's all-time greats. Kelly Slater is tonight the toast of Tahiti. Todd Nardi, NBN News.
This is the view that AFT got of global racing getting a ripping start to their right as they raced out of the heads for the first time. This was the next time they saw them. Their $600,000 craft ablaze and the crew forced to abandon ship as 800 litres of fuel sent everything up in smoke.
I just saw this yellow bit of flame and I thought, oh, this is really bad.
In contrast, Triple X got away with little more than a nick and shaken nerves.
We actually thought we missed them, but in about a fraction of a second later, it was a horrible crunch, and that's what's left.
As for the racing, two of the big Class 1 boats, Acme and AFT, got away to a flyer when things got back underway. The latter getting plenty of airtime once on the open ocean as the field headed towards Merriweather Beach and back. But it quickly became a race between two, with Acme trying to hunt down Maritimo. But they would have had better luck trying to catch dinner. Packing twin V12 Lamborghini engines that throw out around 1,800 worth of horsepower between them, Maritimo really was a monster among the field and only continued its unbeaten run this season. The real racing comes from the smaller classes that feature several crews battling for position throughout the race. Local boat Red Bellies giving its home crowd a real close-up look as they won Class 3.
Around 5 months ago, the start of the harvest was delayed by rain. This morning, the end of the harvest, symbolised by the ringing of the bells, was also delayed, but for a much different reason. Eventually, the bells did toll to formally end this season's grape harvest. And well below the bell tower at Bimbadgen Estate, the last vat of Sangiovese grapes was released. The Italian variety will make the last wine of a season which threw up challenges, including grapes being affected by periods of hail and heavy rain.
Continuous downpour then, and so you get mostly dilution of flavour and a little bit of mould set in. So we left those grapes on the vine and just were happy with the grapes we got in.
Very happy apparently. Wine from the 2005 harvest is expected to rival anything from the last 5 years.
Well, I suppose people are comparing it to 2000, which was the last very good vintage in the Hunter, so I'd say it's at least as good as 2000, if not better.
Todd Nardi, NBN News. After 26 years of being played at Toronto, south of Newcastle, the CHS Rugby League trials see a significant change this year. 2 new teams have been included. One of those is the President's 13, made up of players from across the state who narrowly missed out on selection in their divisional side. Thankful for the opportunity, Tim Holman from Hunter Sports High didn't disappoint. This year, instead of one Sydney team, the city is fielding a red side and a gold outfit, but don't expect that to make facing the Metro lads any easier. In the Opens, Sydney Gold made Northern New South Wales feel anything but at home. No doubt the Newcastle Knights will be hoping to recruit the best schoolboy talents, while scouts from all NRL clubs are expected to write down names this week. Starved of possession, Northern had few opportunities to impress, but the spirit of the country boys was obvious in defence. With an edge in size and mobility, Sydney Gold beat Northern 30 points to 4. The New South Wales CHS side will be announced after the final matches on Wednesday afternoon. Todd Nardi, NBN News.
Behind every artwork, there's a story of pain, but also of a life worth remembering. As part of National Palliative Care Week, patients from the Newcastle Mater Hospice have mounted their creative works for the world to see.
What they often get out of it, even more than the finished product though, is the ability to share their thoughts and ideas with the other group members that they're working with at the time.
This piece from a cancer sufferer conveys her longing for hair. Journals provide important keepsakes for family members, as do sketches and a patchwork quilt that tells so much about one woman's life and her love of family. The pieces form part of a life enhancement program which has been running for 8 years and goes far beyond brightening up the hospice.
Sense of pride that they're still able to contribute a great deal in any aspect of their life. To be able to make something that's actually beautiful and that's respected by other people is a really big deal for them.
Colleen West, NBN News.
The crutches gave it away, the ankle boot confirmed it, But the forlorn figure of Mark Hughes said it all. Injuring his ankle in a tackle midway through the first half of Saturday's match against the Dragons, Hughes battled on. Requiring pain-killing injections, he fought on until full time before realising his worst thoughts, a break. For a player off contract and set to miss more than 2 months of football, his future at Newcastle past this season is now uncertain. At a club still searching for a win after 10 games, it only adds to the heartache of that 2-point loss.
Obviously, we're getting close, but close isn't good enough. You know, close doesn't get you the drinks, and it's hard to put so much effort in each week and come away beaten again, I suppose.
Charged with a Grade 1 careless tackle, Craig Smith escaped suspension. His front row partner Josh Perry, though, is in much more trouble. Facing between 5 and 7 weeks suspension, the club will reserve a decision on whether to contest the charge until tomorrow. While Dragons coach Nathan Brown made his thoughts clear, those still playing prefer a different view.
It's never going to be proven proper the whole time when you're trying to belt blokes, and that's what everyone was trying to do out there.
I don't have a problem with blokes showing passion out there. I mean, it's a contact sport. You're off by the slightest margin and you're going to make the mistake.
It's often been described as a soft drug, with many teenagers believing marijuana or cannabis to be harmless. But researchers are now proving otherwise.
Well, so far we're seeing changes in the way that cannabis users are able to activate their brain.
With the help of a 3-year National Health and Medical Research Council grant, Martin Cohen is heading a study that's focusing on frontal brain development, the area where we hold and process information. Using participants aged between 17 and 26, computer images clearly show any damaging effects.
See here in healthy subjects the pattern of activation when people are doing a thinking task, whereas over here we can see in the cannabis users and the schizophrenia patients, they're much less able to activate their brain when doing a thinking task.
Marijuana has been linked to mental health issues among teenagers, and it's research into how using the drug can lead to developing schizophrenia that is groundbreaking.
It gives us very important information into what's actually happening with regard to what we call pathological processes or disease processes, and that how that affects a person's behaviour and how it affects their thinking functions.
The research team is looking for recruits. Anyone interested can go to the Centre for Mental Health Studies website or contact James Fletcher Hospital.
After a week of wet weather, it was a battle just to get the Barley Ranch track rideable, but come race time, the dust gave a fair indication of what type of job organisers had done. And that unmistakable sound of motocross roared once again. It didn't take long for the usual suspects to take up position, with series leader Darryl Hurley taking the lead from fellow Kiwi Daryl King. It's that number 1 plate that Hurley is after as he races to win King's crown as Australian Pro Open champion, and yesterday's winning effort only helps. Homegrown rider Danny Ham, meanwhile, cemented 4th spot with a solid day out. From the dry heat to ice cold, and the Newcastle North Stars just can't buy a win at the moment in the National Ice Hockey competition. After an extra time match against Canberra failed to find a result, the North Stars backed up to play the Central Coast yesterday in another nail-biter. Down 2-1 late in the match, a superb effort from defenceman Don Nichols tied things up for the home side, which now sits in 4th spot after 9 games. Meanwhile, in Premier League field hockey, West upset South 3-2, while wins also for North, Gosford and Maitland, which beat Norah Head 9-1.